All right, good evening, everybody. It is 7 p.m. in NYC and in the beautiful Finger Lakes region of upstate New York. I'm Sam Kimball from Crush Wine Experiences, formerly New York Wine Events, and thank you so much for joining us for the virtual day trip to wine country presented by Citi. We are here for a virtual visit to a storied Finger Lakes winery in Watkins Glen, New York, on the Seneca Lake. It's Lakewood Vineyards. In 1951, the Stamp family moved to Lakewood Farm, a rundown peach and apple orchard on the west side of Seneca Lake. The next spring, they started planting grapes. The original grapes were those that were favored by large wineries and grape juice companies. And in the mid-'80s, the family diversified to add some new varietals of grapes with the hope of someday using them to make their own wines. 37 years after moving to the Lakewood farm, the Stamp family in 1988 pressed their first vintage of grapes and started making their first vintage of wine. And at that point, it was like, hey, enough selling grapes to Welch's and the big corporate wineries. And now they've been making wines for 34 years at Lakewood Vineyards. And what a story it is. Along the way, Lakewood Vineyards has won a number of awards: Winery of the Year, a Lifetime Achievement Award, Wine Family of the Year, and more. And let's take a look. Let's take a second to appreciate everything that's happened there and the wonderful family heritage that they have. I'm actually going to show a video on screen of all about the Lakewood Vineyards. So bear with me a moment, and here we go. This will be fun. All right.
I think when visitors come into Lakewood, they really get that sense of family, and I think customers really feel like they are part of that family as well. My grandma's kind of the matriarch. She does a little bit of everything. My father's the winemaker. My brother and I are the assistant winemakers. My mom, Liz, manages all the logistical stuff on that end. I've got a couple aunts and cousins that work in the tasting room as well. The vineyard was first planted in the 50s by my great-grandfather, and then it was farmed by my grandfather for many years. And now my uncle Dave manages the vineyards. We've kind of learned from our ancestors, I guess, best practices and really honed that in. And we've learned as winemakers how to work with the grapes off this farm. We're familiar with each vineyard block and how to treat that in the cellar and really capture the essence of the land and the vineyard in our wines. Grown here, made here to me means that you can literally look out the window of the wine cellar where we're making the wine and see the grapes that are growing. And it's that close. We pick them and we start making wine out of them right away.
How cool is that? That's courtesy of the Seneca Lake Wine Trail, a great organization up there in the Finger Lakes. I don't know about you guys, but it makes me want to drop what I'm doing and move up to the Finger Lakes, which is a magical part of New York State and the wine ecosystem. So let's take let's talk briefly about the Finger Lakes. For anybody who is not familiar, the Finger Lakes obviously are in New York State. New York State is the fourth largest wine producing region in the United States. And the Finger Lakes is the biggest, the largest wine producing region in New York State. There's 11,000 acres of vineyards. And I want to show a little map here just of what we're talking about. The lakes are absolutely, stunning and dramatic. If you see them from an airplane, It's really dramatic. Now, if you see here in my background, this is a wide shot of New York State. That little red map pin up there is the Lakewood Vineyards location in Watkins Glen. You can see New York City all the way down in the corner there, and even Philadelphia lower than that. So this is a very wide shot. And if we zoom in, you can really see the fingers of the Finger Lakes there. And Seneca Lake is obviously one of the big ones. Those lakes are as long as 40 plus miles long. And, you know, largely they can be, even at their widest, quite narrow, like a couple miles wide. So a truly amazing, you know, sort of glacial phenomenon in the area. And we'll learn more about why that's important for winemaking momentarily. But that's a little bit about the geography of the Finger Lakes. The grape growing is centered around some of those larger lakes, Canandaigua, Keuka, Seneca, and Cayuga lakes. And both the Cayuga and Seneca lakes actually have their own American viticultural areas, or AVAs. And Lakewood Vineyards, of course, our guest tonight, is in the Seneca Lake AVA, which is a sub-region of the Finger Lakes region. The Finger Lakes is often compared to German wine regions along the Rhine River in Germany. Riesling, the Riesling grape, is one of the most important grape varieties in Germany. It's also one of the most successful, perhaps the most successful grape variety from the Finger Lakes. And you might ask, like, what is it about this magical place, the Finger Lakes, in terms of wine? And really, at the end of the day, it's about the deep lakes in the region that moderate the local microclimate, and the stored heat in the lakes, in the water, which stays warmer than the air in the winter. During the winter, it keeps the local climate mild relative to surrounding areas, and it prevents early frost. And all in all, that's really, really good for growing grapes and for the grapevines themselves. Hence, that's why the area is so conducive to farming grapes. And let me show you a shot I think that's kind of dramatically illustrates that. If you look in my background here, this is a picture of the lake. You can see in the background that same area in, you know, you can have literally fog coming off of that because the water is significantly warmer than the air. And that's what makes for great grape growing conditions. So I want to welcome one and welcome all. Thank you guys for tuning in. Please ask any questions along the way. Just interrupt us. Please interrupt us if you would. And also hit the chat. And when you want to ask questions and make comments, hit the chat. Hit the chat right now and let us know where in the world you're tuning in from. I see some folks that I know, Mark, West Orange, New Jersey, Myra in PA, and Nancy in Long Island. Welcome, you guys. And if others who are watching, definitely East Northport, Long Island in the house. Thank you so much for tuning in. It's great to see you guys. California, goodness gracious. It's almost wine drinking time there. It's not quite 5 o'clock. Thank you guys for tuning in. It's great to see you. So I want to really quickly let you know that if you'd like to learn more about Lakewood Vineyards, you can go to lakewoodvineyards.com. They got a great website. You can see that video again there. There's a lot of information about the heritage and the family. I'm just putting the URL in the chat so you can access it. And welcome, Shenandoah Valley, Virginia, Ludlow, Mass. Amazing. Alicia says it's 5 o'clock somewhere. It is definitely 5 o'clock somewhere. So without further ado, I would like to bring in our guest this evening. He is Ben Stamp, the assistant winemaker and a member of the Stamp family at Lakewood Vineyards. Welcome, Ben. It is great having you this evening.
Thank you, Sam. It's great to be here with you and with everybody else tuning in around the country. It sounds like you've got a great crew, and I think they're ready for 5 o'clock, no matter where they're tuning in from. I hope.
Exactly. So, and where does this broadcast find you this evening?
Well, in one sense, it's too bad that that we haven't developed some sort of way to transmit wonderful aromas through Zoom. But in another way, it's probably good because I spent all day here at the winery bottling. And now I'm out in the tasting room doing this. So the wines smell great. I may not smell great, but I'm still here and broadcasting from our tasting room just about a mile from Seneca Lake here in Watkins Glen, New York.
That's awesome. By the way, I'm glad we've clarified where you are, because there's a sign behind you that says it's a dentist office.
So that's actually was the original sign outside the dentist office of my great-grandfather, Frank Stamp, who purchased this farm in 1951. He was a dentist on a Navy ship in World War II. After that, he ended up opening a private practice in Cumberland, Maryland, and decided after a little while that the land was calling. So he moved back to Watkins Glen, New York, where he originally was from, and purchased the old peach and apple orchard, like you mentioned, which is the site of all of our vineyards today. So,
and what was it really?
Ancient history back there.
Was it? Well, that's cool. I love that sign. That's a great origin story. And was it really a rundown peach and apple orchard?
Yeah, it wasn't producing a whole lot at the time. They started planting grapes the following year, and originally were selling, like you mentioned, to some other large corporate wine producers that have been in this area in the Finger Lakes since the mid 1800s. And also selling some fresh fruit on literally just a roadside stand, and did that for many years.
Wow.
Before we started making our own wine.
That's amazing. All right. So let's talk Watkins Glen, the town that you and the winery are in, and the Seneca Lake sub-AVA or sub-wine region. Many people kind of look at the Finger Lakes sort of as one amorphous, large, big wine region, which it is, but that doesn't take into account the nuances that are represented by the sub-AVAs within the region. How is Seneca Lake AVA different than the other areas?
Great question. Seneca Lake is the deepest of the Finger Lakes, and we're at the southern end of Seneca Lake. So the lakes were glacially carved during the last ice age, and as the last glaciers receded, 11 or 12,000 years ago, they basically dammed up these enormous valleys that they had carved and created these lakes. Seneca Lake is actually over 670 feet deep at the deepest point. It's so deep, in fact, that the U.S. Navy has a sonar testing station in the lake, because there's really nowhere else you can be only 1 mile offshore and be over 600 feet deep. So they use it for testing advanced sonar equipment. It's a pretty neat land feature. It does not freeze. And if you've ever seen a picture of the Finger Lakes from space in the winter, it's pretty astounding. The Finger Lakes are still blue. The surrounding 1 or 2 miles around the Finger Lakes is uncovered by snow, and the rest of the state is covered by snow. And oftentimes you'll see even Lake Erie and Lake Ontario frozen over. But the lakes are so long and narrow and so deep that they act as a huge reservoir for all that sunshine in the summer. And then they slowly give that off in the winter, keeping it warmer and more moderate around the shores of the lake. And then in the springtime, like right now, when we might be looking for some really warm days here coming up this weekend, it's actually supposed to get up into the 80s up here this weekend. But it'll be much cooler down by the lake. And that's actually good this time of year, because it'll keep all those tender little buds from trying to sprout. And, I'm not perfectly convinced that we're past the last spring frost. So it'll be best if those buds stay dormant right now, where they're protected from frost. And eventually, when they warm up enough, they can come out once the risk of the last spring frost is passed. So the lake really does almost triple duty, as it extends the growing season in the fall as well. So we get extended growing season in the fall, protection from the lowest winter temperatures in the winter, and then a delayed bud break in the spring. It's really all about proximity to the lakes here in the Finger Lakes. And if you look at this picture, you can see our Pinot Noir vineyard on the right, Riesling on the left, and more Riesling down closer to the lake on the left side as well. And then Seneca Lake in the background.
And so at this point of the lake, here's your vineyards are sort of right up towards the edge of the lake there. How wide is that to the other side of the lake?
That's probably just over 2 miles here.
2 miles.
Yeah,
So
so pretty quite narrow.
It's deceptive because it sort of looks like it's just right over there, but it's 2 miles.
Well,
Now,
that's the funny thing about the Finger Lakes is, as we say around here, you know, everything's really close, but you can't get there from here. You have to go around
right.
unless you're in a plane. And so, you know, we have
how,
a lot of
how long is at this lake we're looking at from one left side to the right side? How long is it?
Yeah, it's about 39 miles long.
Oh my God.
So, you know, luckily we're pretty close to the southern end. We're only about 3.5 miles from the southern tip of the lake.
Right.
But of course, if we have to go over to the other side of the lake, we have to drive around. And especially when we're going to the opposite side of the lake on the northern end, it's quite a haul to get there. And, you know, so that's one thing that we always kind of complain amongst us winemakers. It's a very cooperative winemaking atmosphere up here. And we're dear friends and colleagues with all the winemakers at other wineries here in the Finger Lakes for the most part. And that I can't say that for every wine region I've worked in, and that's been quite a few. But we always complain that we don't get to see each other and collaborate enough because the lakes get in the way.
Well, and again, I wanted to your point about you can't get there from here. I want to show everybody just another look at that shot I showed earlier of the map here. I mean, this is like, there you are with the red map pin, right? Mm-hmm. So you're lucky because you're relatively close. You look like you're about 10 miles, maybe 7 miles from the bottom. You could go around the other side. It's not too bad. Somebody in the middle, if you're up by Penn Yan or Dundee, just to get around to somebody's house on the other side is a journey.
Yes, it is. So they may only live 3 miles as the crow flies, but you're gonna spend about 40 minutes in a car getting there. So
yeah, absolutely. Well, a lot of interesting stuff. So in terms of the Watkins Glen AVA and Seneca Lake, does it bring different characteristics, aromatics, smell, taste characteristics to the wine than the others?
Great question. So, you know, we've been kind of debating that for a long time. And one of the things that people talk about when they talk about terroir, for instance, that French term, which always has a very vague description and changes depending on who you talk to in the wine business. The thing about the Finger Lakes is when the glaciers receded, they dumped dirt everywhere. So we have a dozen different soil types just on our own farm alone, and we've got about 300 acres here. So there might be a place with some thick clay, and just a stone's throw away, you'll have shale and sandy soil that's well drained. Then you'll have some granite that got carried down from Canada and dumped there. So the way that the soil was deposited as the glaciers receded is dramatically affects the way that the choices that you might make when you're planting, which the vineyards there, but also it's going to affect the outcome of those grapes. And so more than just the lakes alone, where there's so many confounding factors that it really comes down to just knowing your vineyard sites pretty intimately. We do purchase some grapes from Cuca Lake and on occasion Cayuga Lake as well, because we have some long-term grower contracts that we have over there. You know, people that just grow grapes and don't have wineries, and they do a really good job. So, you know, we like all the appellations. Seneca Lake does, like I said, it has never frozen in my lifetime. Apparently it froze once back in the 50s, and I certainly don't ever want to be around in a winter that gets cold enough to freeze this lake. That sounds miserable to me. We've had some cold ones and it hasn't frozen. So it definitely gives us an added level of protection that some of the more shallow lakes don't. But
so your soil brings some unique and distinctive characteristics to the wine, flavors and aromatics that you wouldn't get at one of the other places where it's different because of what you were discussing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we have a question from Mark. Did your grandfather or great-grandfather know Dr. Constantine Frank?
Yes, of course. You know, everybody it's a really tight-knit community over here. And, especially all the growers in the early days of planting vinifera, really had to band together and kind of create best practices on their own and figure out how they could make these grapes survive here and get the best quality fruit off of them. It's funny, I actually went to school over at Cornell with Dr. Constantine Frank's great granddaughter, Megan.
Yeah, Megan. We've had Megan on this
Yeah.
broadcast.
So Megan's a dear friend of mine, and so it's still we've retained that spirit of collaboration and cooperation here in the Finger Lakes since the early days, because it's really kind of just like in farming, it's you against Mother Nature to a certain extent. And so being able to share best practices has been a huge strength of this area.
So when you were at Cornell, did your parents ever pull you aside and say, Megan Frank got straight A's last semester. Ben, you got to step it up.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if our parents were sharing our grades with each other, but no, they never razzed me about it. I had reasonably good grades too, but yeah, good.
Well, because I mean, you're talking about two heritage families from the winery world of the Finger Lakes. The Franks and the Stamps, and they're got grandkids now at Cornell, and there you are. For anybody who doesn't know Dr. Frank Winery, just tell the folks of what is Dr. Constantine Frank and why is it meaningful?
So Dr. Constantine Frank was actually a Ukrainian immigrant who moved to the Finger Lakes in the 40s, I think, and decided, I think that we can grow traditional vinifera European wine grapes here in the Finger Lakes, and to a large extent he was laughed at the time, but he proved that it could be done on the shores of Seneca Lake, and started planting a number of different varieties, but namely Riesling. And so he was one of the first to identify Riesling as a promising cultivar here in the Finger Lakes in the 50s. The rest is kind of history. Founded a wonderful winery called Dr. Constantine Frank Vineyards, and they of course exist to this day and make fantastic wine over on Seneca Lake. And actually, after college, Megan went down to Australia and studied wine marketing and the University of South Australia in Adelaide, and that kind of planted this seed in my head. I said, man, you know what, maybe before I really come back home and put down roots there for good, I need to go to Australia. And I was lucky enough to do that and make wine in West Australia in 2015, which was a wonderful opportunity to go make wine in that part of the world.
That is so cool. I did not know that you and Megan were at Cornell at the same time, or that you were close. And I think that it's just a very fun fact. And for anybody who knows New York wines and the storied wineries, it's a cool piece of information. So let's mix things up. Let's talk a little bit about Riesling, and then let's jump into our two Rieslings for tonight. You talk about being on the highest on the learning curve for Riesling. When you say that, what do you mean as a winemaker?
Well, it's interesting. The Finger Lakes is different from some wine regions in that oftentimes a young wine region will identify a grape that is commercially viable, or they see as having a lot of staying power commercially, and then they'll try to build their industry around that. The Finger Lakes really kind of took maybe a bit of a more difficult approach in actually going and trying to find the grape that was most well suited to our microclimate here in the Finger Lakes. And that is undoubtedly Riesling. It's really what all of the main energy has been put towards over the last 30, 40, 50 years here in the Finger Lakes, is perfecting our Riesling, both in the vineyard and in the cellar. And it's been an uphill battle from the consumer side, I'll have to admit, because there's so many people out there that think Riesling is always sweet. And that's justifiable. For many years, most of the Riesling available in America was imported from Germany. And Germany makes some of the best Riesling in the world, but for many years they didn't send it here. They just sent some of the cheap sweet stuff. And it really left an impression on American wine consumers that all Riesling is sweet. But of course, if you go to Germany and really explore German Rieslings, you'll find a wide array, everything from, of course, very sweet, like their Trockenbeeren Auslese and their dessert style Rieslings, which are even to this day some of the most expensive wines in the whole world, all the way to extremely dry, bone dry Rieslings with great acidity and incredible food friendly nature. So it's a versatile grape variety that can do so many different things really, really well. And it lends itself to so many different food pairings. So a style of dry Riesling has really kind of become a calling card here for the Finger Lakes, where it features a lot of citrus and tropical fruit, a little bit of a mineral spice on the finish, and a really fresh profile that can age for decades.
Yeah, no, and let's talk about this first one, because I had not tasted it until I opened it up a few minutes ago, and man, I love it. And I just said, wow, Finger Lakes, Seneca Lake Riesling is something to behold. So I'm going to put up the bottle on screen, but let's talk about this dry Riesling that you were just discussing. So here it is.
Oh man, Sam, I think we need to be charging more for this wine.
I think you do too. I mean, this is from the 2020 vintage. It was a warm, dry summer. One of the warmest and certainly the driest since we've started growing grapes here in the Finger Lakes. And the fruit quality was impeccable. It's one of those years where we were a little bit worried that Riesling might actually get overripe, which isn't something we usually have to worry about because it's a late harvest variety. And we don't typically start picking Riesling until about the middle of October. But this stuff came in so nicely. It has this beautiful backbone of acidity, which is where you know that it's that pure Finger Lakes Riesling. It's got that acidity, a little bit of a crunchy kind of green apple spice on the finish, and a nice floral and tropical fruit nose. And you can have this wine with sharp cheeses, shellfish or grilled fish as well. Whitefish, it's really good with that. So, sky's the limit with Riesling. The backbone of acidity and the intensity of flavors make it just really versatile. So I actually screwed up the computer and I said, you know what, I'm gonna pair it with a little bit of smoked Gouda, and it's nice with smoked Gouda. I mean, it's not a traditional pairing. So,
no. Yeah. So I see a question coming in from Mark. Actually, it's kind of popping up on my screen too, and I'm just gonna dive into that. The minerality is one of those concepts that, from a winemaker standpoint, it's kind of tangential to terroir, if you will. We try to be more granular about it. We say, okay, well, if it's minerality, that's such a nebulous concept. What does that mean? So what we would say with something like this, I would say this has a little bit of a gravelly character or an aroma like a stream after the rain, or like the shale or slate that we find around here. Seneca is actually literally translated from Native American word to place of the stone. And the bedrock here is all this shale, which originally came into existence in the Cretaceous period, when we had inland seas that created the bedrock around here. And that's what the Finger Lakes were carved out of. And so, there's a lot of discussion about whether grapevines actually pull flavor from stone or whatever their substrate is up into the grapes, and then that makes it into the wine. All evidence is that doesn't actually happen, although it's fantastic marketing. But this does have, and I think it's part of the balance of the acidity that you perceive on Riesling, is that this has a kind of a crunchy, gravelly character that keeps it fresh and dry and makes your mouth water a little bit for the next bit. You asked about the petrol character as well. That's something that Riesling tends to develop after a couple years in the bottle, at least. For these warmer vintages, we do expect to see that a little earlier on in the aging process. So I'm not getting any right now, but I expect that in a couple years we'll definitely see that, if history is any indication of how these wines age.
And this one is hugely drinkable. It's 10.2% alcohol by volume. I mean, really easy drinking, but super food friendly. It's refreshing, Ben. A lot of nice, but balanced acidity. It's not hard.
We really try to, I think our wines show that you don't need to have a lot of alcohol to have a lot of flavor. And that's, so many wine regions have been pursuing higher alcohols and more extracted styles throughout the years. And we've kind of just really stuck to making fresh, flavorful wines that are usually in the 10 to 12.5 alcohol percentage range. And if you find a Riesling that's much above that, that's highly unusual for the Finger Lakes.
Yeah, no, I love this. And I think my original cheese pairing for this was sharp cheddar.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be even better than this Gouda I have. All right, let's move on to the classic Riesling. This is a semi-dry. And again, this is right, down, the main pike of Finger Lakes wine in terms of the grape, the style. I love this one too. Tell us a little bit about it. I'll put it up on the screen.
Yeah.
So
this wine, this is actually the style of Riesling that we made originally in 1988 when we only made one Riesling. And it's such a food-friendly style because it's got a little bit of sweetness, it's got a lot of flavor, and it's got plenty of acidity to carry that sweetness. So it really doesn't finish sweet at all. And on the back of the label, it actually has a little scale that is called the IRF scale. That's an abbreviation for the International Riesling Federation. It's a group of Riesling producers from around the world, mostly Germany, France, Australia, and of course the United States, mostly here in the Finger Lakes. They got together and created this scale, which has actually been adopted quite widely across the Riesling producing world. And this scale takes into consideration the amount of residual sugar in grams per liter. That's sugar that's left over after the fermentation that the yeast did not convert into alcohol. And then it takes into consideration the pH, and then the titratable acidity, the TA, if you will, so the acid level. And it puts you somewhere on this scale between dry, medium sweet, and sweet. And the idea is, if you see a Riesling with this scale on the back, you can know for sure what you're getting, because people label Rieslings differently all over the world. And sometimes it can be really difficult to see whether you're getting a dry Riesling or a sweet Riesling. And so that lack of clarity for consumers is one of the things that makes people not pick up Riesling, because it can be difficult to really parse out what you're getting. And this IRF scale is a great way, look for that next time you're out searching for Riesling, and hopefully that'll kind of illuminate the process a little bit for you.
Yeah, I want to show everybody an example of the IRF scale. So bear with me a sec, Ben. I'm going to pull it up. This one, I mean, it's got just the right amount of sweetness. It's semi-dry, but it just goes down very easy. And it's not, there's nothing cloying about the sweetness. It's very it's charming.
Well, that when we go for blending this wine, we're really attentive to make sure that the sweetness on the palate matches the aromatics of the wine. So I get a lot more like ripe peach and tropical fruit in here. So that kind of pineapple and peach and star fruit. And it just, when you smell it, you think sweetness because of the fruit character there. And then, the palate comes in kind of sweet when you first taste it, and then it finishes dry because it's got that great acidity. And all great wine is really a balancing act between sweetness, alcohol, and acidity. And of course, if it's a red wine, tannins as well. And they kind of pull each other in different directions. And it's the tension that keeps your mouth excited and keeps you wanting to go back for another sip. It's also one of the things that makes it really good with food, because the acidity can really kind of refresh your palate and cut through the fattiness or saltiness of a dish. The sweetness can kind of tame some of the spiciness. So this wine is actually one of my favorite wines to have with spicy foods, especially Asian or Thai cuisine. I really like it with that. My wife and I cook that sort of food all the time, and this is a classic pairing for something like that.
Yeah, I'm going to pull this up and just show the scale, because I think it's interesting to see. So bear with me a moment, and here we go. So this is an IRF Riesling scale. So you might see you would see one of these, not all of these. These are 4 different examples on the back of a bottle of Riesling.
You got it. And you can look for the little copyright IRF there, and you'll know that it's not just a scale that the winery came up with. It's one that has some verified metrics behind it. So
yeah, and by the way, your classic Riesling, the one that we're talking about right now, that's semi-sweet, semi-dry, is literally, it is dead set in the middle.
Yep.
Of the scale.
Yep.
So neither sweet nor
it's good.
Nor
it's
dry.
A crowd pleaser in the sense that, people who like a wine with a little sweetness can enjoy it. But then on the other side, it doesn't really come across as sweet. So dry wine drinkers tend to enjoy it as well.
Couple questions. Myra asks, how long can you age these wines?
Yeah, we've actually found that usually the cooler years, at cooler, longer growing seasons here in the Finger Lakes age better than the warmer, drier years. So I would expect a wine like that 2020 dry Riesling to age for 6 to 10 years, and probably get better up, depending on how you like it. It changes. I'm not going to say it gets better, but it's going to favor more of that savory petrol and mineral character, like Mark was asking about, and less of the fresh fruit and floral character early, later on in its aging into its life. And then some of the cooler years, like 2017 and 2019, for instance, those wines can go for decades. It was maybe 2 years ago now, we dug an old bottle of our 1992 semi-dry Riesling out of our wine library and opened it up, and it blew my mind. It just was like straight honey, petrol, gravel, like apricot. It was absolutely delicious. And that was almost 30 years in. So
yeah,
I think the question is kind of, we haven't had enough time yet to figure out exactly how long they age, maybe.
Yeah, well,
it's fun.
Real quick, percentage of alcohol in the classic is 12.2, Mark. What's the residual sugar in this wine, Ben?
I think this is 2%. I think you have the spec sheet on that, Sam. I don't actually have it in front of me. And this is the 2019 vintage. I want to say it's 2%, and the acid's somewhere around 7.8 grams per liter. Yeah. So.
Got it. No, really nice wine. All right. So let's move on to, so this was a whole education in crash course in Riesling. Let's pivot to a crash course in hybrid grapes.
Oh, cool.
So I recently attended the Bev New York conference, which is all about the grape growing and the winemaking industry in the state of New York. It is the industry event. Tons of vineyard owners and growers, and also wineries and producers of wine. And really the theme of the 3-day conference was hybrid grapes. So a hybrid grape, for the pedestrian among us, of which I count myself in that group, the fact of the matter is these are not the traditional European vinifera grapes like your Chardonnay or Six Noble grapes, Merlot, Pinot Noir, etc. These are grapes that are, developed here or in the area that they're grown, and they aren't the traditional European grapes. And this wine that we're about to taste, the Bubbly Candeo, is made with a hybrid grape. But give us like the 30-second overview on hybrid grapes, Ben, if you would.
Will do. Yeah. The whole idea of hybrid grapes actually came, every grape to a certain extent is a hybrid grape because, traditional European wine grapes were bred and selected over the course of thousands of years for the characteristics that we know and love in all of those, whether it's Riesling, Cabernet Franc, Pinot Noir. You're familiar with all those varieties. And once European settlers got to America, they found all these wild grapes growing in the forests and on the hillsides and around the lakes. And they took many of these back to Europe. Unbeknownst to them, these grapes harbored a small root louse pathogen, which started to wipe out the vineyards in Europe. And in a desperate attempt to try to find a solution, many people started in the early days of kind of more traditional French hybridization. They started making crosses and breeding these grapes together so that they could try to find some sort of grape that they could grow that tasted like the grapes they were used to, but had all the disease resistance that the Native American grapes had because they were not affected by this pest that was brought over. Fast forward many years later, you imagine they were quite surprised when they figured out that you could actually just take a cutting from whatever grapevine you want to grow and stick it on the roots of whatever grapevine is immune to this pest. And voila, grafting allows you to grow grapes in previously infested soil without having any trouble. So it really was a simpler fix that kind of circumvented that whole issue and allowed them to continue growing grapes in Europe. But many of the hybrids that they developed back in the 1800s in France still exist today in France, of course, and also here in the Finger Lakes. And there are researchers at various universities around the United States, including Cornell, who are dutifully looking at the potential for hybrids to alleviate other agricultural pressures, including disease, a changing climate, and other such things that we have to deal with when we're dealing with Mother Nature. So, one of the missions of these researchers is to try to incorporate the best things of the native European grape varieties, the flavor and aromas that we all like, and some of the productivity, disease hardiness, cold tolerance, drought stress tolerance that some of the Native American varieties are known for. And they've been creating these hybrids since they founded these universities. But one of the most successful, probably arguably the most successful, would be the Cayuga White. And that's what we use for this Bubbly Candeo. It's a large green grape. It crops relatively well and is quite disease resistant and very cold hardy as well. So there's a lot of potential for these grape varieties that many people haven't heard of to allow people to grow grapes in areas that are affected by climate change or that are, for other reasons, would have been previously unsuitable for grape growing. It's really opened up some new frontiers all along the East Coast for grape growing. But many acres of Cayuga White are grown here in the Finger Lakes, and we decided to try our hand at making a Prosecco style sparkling wine out of Cayuga because it makes a really nice base wine. It's got a pretty aromatic structure. It doesn't have a lot of phenolics, which is great. It retains nice acidity. It's got a fresh kind of floral character, a little bit of a Granny Smith apple character as well, and makes a nice base wine for a bubbly. So we do this Bubbly Candeo here in a screw cap, which is easily accessible. I think we sell it for $13 a bottle or something like that.
14 at North Fork Price.
And so it's actually become a staff favorite here and a favorite in the area. A go-to, makes a great mimosa. It's just really easy to drink. It's a nice, it's a nice wine. It's your dinner foreplay. You know, when you're still getting dinner ready and you want to crack open a bottle.
Yeah.
This is great for a weeknight. It's a great weeknight bubbly. Yep.
It's absolutely charming, Ben. This is, by the way, this is your best selling wine at Lakewood Vineyards, correct?
Yeah, it is. We're gonna bottle almost 5,000 cases this year, which is more than we've ever bottled of any one particular wine by a long shot. So, some people really enjoy it as their go-to affordable kind of weeknight bubbly because, hey, this is the 21st century, right? There's no reason you shouldn't be able to have bubbly on a weeknight at the very least.
And it's really light. It's 10% alcohol by volume.
Yep.
This is like if you're gonna binge on Netflix and get the snacks and get the popcorn, this is a great wine just to have with you. And Mark, yes, I would say it's off dry. Would you agree, Ben?
Yeah, definitely. This is about 1.7% residual sugar, but it's got acid that's up around 9.5 grams per liter. So, it hits that palate like a traditional, like a Prosecco does.
Yep.
And it's really along those lines where it's got a little bit of that sweet tart thing going on, finishes nice and dry with the effervescence as well. So it doesn't have the full carbonation that you'd expect out of like a bottle fermented method, like a traditional champagne. So it's somewhere between, well, we say it's for those times when beer is not enough and champagne's just too much. And, the carbonation really hits right in there too. So it's not like going to explode your palate with that. It's more subtle and enjoyable.
But it's like, you just look at this with the pour, like it's just delicious and light, super charming. What are the winemaker tasting notes on this, Ben?
So we suggested you drink this often, basically. No, it's a fun wine that we like because it's got like a nice little tangerine citrus note on the nose, a little bit of that Granny Smith apple. That's kind of a hallmark of the Cayuga white grape, and it finishes super clean. You're not going to have any of the bitterness that you find in some sparkling wines, and a lot of it's really just about the texture on the palate, which is very pleasing. So it's light and it invites you to take another sip.
Yeah, no, for sure. And what's a pairing? What's a cheese you would put with this wine?
Boy, this one's tough to go wrong with. You don't want anything that's too fatty with something like this, too creamy. So yep. I'll usually go towards something like maybe Manchego. That's kind of a favorite in our household.
Mm-hmm.
It's nice with this. Even a softer style Pecorino can be really good as well. But a semi soft to a semi hard cheese somewhere in there.
Yeah, I just had it right now with a little Manchego, and I'm going to step out and let you finish the broadcast because I got to go drink some bubbly Candeo and eat some more Manchego. Yeah. Super cool. All right, so let's move on. We've got a dry rosé, which I have not tried yet. I just got the bottle yesterday, Ben. Thank you.
Well, Sam, we just bottled it like a week and a half ago. So
wow,
it's rosé season, and we've been facing some supply chain issues like everybody else. So we were kind of waiting on screw caps actually as one of the holdups on this, and we finally got it out. So I'm glad you got it in time.
So speaking of which, everybody listen carefully.
That's what I want to hear. Yeah.
There we go. That's the screw cap.
See, I'm really picky about it because I'm the one that has to tune in the screw capper head to make sure that they're going on right. So I want to hear that crack.
No, it worked. It worked beautifully.
Good.
I'm doing a little rinse from my bubbly Candeo glass and pouring a taste of the dry rosé. This is all Pinot Noir, yeah?
Yes, it is. 2020 was a pretty cool wet year here in the Finger Lakes, and we actually grow a lot of Pinot here in the Finger Lakes. And on a year like, I said 2021. On a year like 2020, hot and dry, man, we can make a Pinot that'll stand up to any Pinot made here in America for sure. And in a year like 2021, which was cooler and wetter, well, we make rosé, and we pick it a little bit earlier. And I'm always amazed at how great a rosé Pinot Noir makes, which is good because it's not a cheap grape to grow. It's incredibly labor intensive, but man, it really does a nice rosé. It's got a tremendous texture, beautiful floral aromatics with a little bit of a crushed berry character there. So I'm curious to hear your take on it.
I mean, I gotta tell you, I just had a sip of the rosé, a dry rosé made with Pinot Noir, and then I had a bite of goat cheese.
Oh, nice.
And that's a magical combination right there.
I'm like staring across the tasting room at our little like wine fridge, and I know we've got goat cheese in there. I'm so tempted to run and get some.
You run over there. I'll hold down the fort.
I'll just because I got the rest of this bottle afterwards, and my wife is gonna be like, "You were down there drinking rosé and eating goat cheese without me." So she's probably watching right now.
Let me ask the group, who's been up, hit the chat, let us know if you've been up to the Finger Lakes region. I'm sure we've got a number of really very august wine enthusiasts on the broadcast.
Yeah.
Mark's been up.
We're about 4 hours north of Philly, 3.5, 4 hours, depending on whether you hit a car wreck on 76. We're about 4.5 hours out of New York City. Pretty easy trip, right up 17 and then an 86 and over. So it's a good little trip. You get to see some of the beautiful New York State on your way, and then when you get here, you'll know it because you'll see the lakes, and I would definitely encourage anyone who wants to have a little kind of close to home vacation, if you're here in the Northeast or looking for a getaway. It's a beautiful part of the world, and especially if you're coming up in the fall, and all the leaves are changing. This is a prime destination for the leaf peepers, and the lakes are nice and warm at that point of the year. So beautiful.
We have a number of people there. So, all right. So next question for the group, for everybody watching, who's been to Lakewood Vineyards? Don't be shy. Bruce was up in the Finger Lakes last summer, but I want to know if anybody's been to the Stamp.
Bruce, we missed the summers too. It's coming.
Yeah, no, it's definitely coming. Tell us a little bit about, before we wrap up, we're gonna finish up with the Cabernet Franc, but before we do, tell us a little bit about the tasting room and the experience of visiting. And you have a whole hospitality operation there at the winery.
Yeah, we actually it kind of made us look like geniuses during COVID, although it was totally serendipitous. We invested a lot into kind of this indoor-outdoor tasting space just off of our tasting room on the south side. Gets a lot of beautiful sun year-round, and it's actually a deck, but it has a louvered roof system, so we can kind of has motorized controls. We can open up the roof and let beautiful sunlight in the spring and fall, and then shade during the summer when it's hot. And it has vinyl sides that roll up and down, so you can maintain the heat and the view of the lake and the vineyards. So it really feels like you're kind of amongst the vineyards, and that's become our most popular tasting space, especially during the COVID years, which I guess we're still in to a certain extent. As kind of an outdoor tasting area, and you really feel like you're right there amongst the vines. Our tasting room itself is hospitable with beautiful views of the vineyards and the lake as well. And we've got a couple different flights of wine that you can choose from. We've got most of our tasting room staff has been with us for many years, and so they know the wines in and out. And we've actually pulled them into the bottling line or sent them out to the vineyards when they're not too busy. So they've got a really good handle on what goes on here at Lakewood, and they can answer most of the questions, which is great, to have somebody who's really, gotten their hands dirty in it, pouring you the wine, so to speak. So it's a very friendly atmosphere. that picture that Sam's sharing right now is a picture of the family at large that is here pretty much every day running the show.
These are all relatives of yours.
Yeah,
This is the extended Stamp family.
that's right. Yeah, I
And
think
they all
kind of
work in one degree or another. They all work at the Lakewood Vineyards.
yeah, that's right. Yep. I guess it's a pretty big family. But it's a pretty big job. So I guess it's good. It's a good thing that they're all willing to pitch in.
I love this that's what I love the most about the video was that it just showcases the collaboration and, the shoulder to shoulder work of the family to make Lakewood what it is today. And it's just a great story.
Yeah.
So, all right, let's do the final wine, Ben. I've got, now I'm going to go back to my smoked Gouda for the Cab Franc, which is more of a traditional. So I'm going to throw this to you, but as I do, I'm just going to remind everybody, Cabernet Franc is the unofficial red wine grape of the state of New York.
Sure. Yeah, without a doubt. And here's a fun fact that most people don't know. It is actually the very official parent variety of Cabernet Sauvignon, which of course is more widely planted and more widely known. Many thanks in large part to its popularity in Napa, California. But Cabernet Franc is actually the parent variety of Cabernet Sauvignon. It's got a little bit more of a wild, gamey, meaty flavor with a little bit more of a peppery spice on the nose. When you smell and taste a pure Cab Franc, especially from a cool climate like the Finger Lakes or from Loire Valley of France, where it's grown almost exclusively, there's no denying it. I mean, it when you smell it. It's got that peppery character, that raspberry, that briar fruit. It's really delicious. A really delicious wine. It's got some nice firm tannins on the finish and usually carries pretty good acidity too. So it's been a great match for the Finger Lakes. I've had many amazing Cabernet Francs from down in your neck of the woods, Sam, as well, down in Long Island, especially on the North Fork. Yep. And it has kind of become the unofficial red wine of New York State, and the Finger Lakes is no exception to that either. This is from the 2019 vintage, and it was a little bit of a late harvest, and the fruit looked really nice. It's a classic cool climate Cab Franc with some nice savory notes. So I'd say sit this in your cellar for, 2 or 3 years, 4 years, if you're patient, and pull it out and have it with like a nice steak with some roasted peppers or something.
Yeah, no, I like this one very much. It's medium bodied.
Oh yeah.
It's got that the peppery flavor characteristics and aroma, aromatics. But it also it has an interesting color. It's quite light actually.
Yeah. And you'll find that, all the red wines and all the wines really in the Finger Lakes definitely display a lot of vintage variation because our vintages can be very different here. The 2019 was definitely lighter in color. It's a medium bodied red. And like many of the wines, it's definitely on the lower percentage of alcohol range. This is 12.4.
Yep.
It's a bone dry red, of course. But the reds here are definitely built on acidity and they go really well with food for that reason. We're not chasing large extraction. It's definitely more of a traditional old world style. And we produce this essentially the same way that they've been producing it in France and in Loire and Bordeaux for, generations, centuries really. And that's a great picture of it right there. That's a bin. That bin right there holds about 1 ton of fruit. And you can see that's my sister doing what we would call punch downs, or in French, they'd call pigeage. And as the grapes ferment in this bin on the skins, then all of the fermenting juice creates this carbon dioxide as a byproduct of fermentation. And that buoys all the skins and seeds and everything up to the top. And you have to go in with a big wooden mallet that I think my grandfather made back in the 90s. And we punch them down. We basically push that cap, all the skins and seeds that rise up to the top, and we mix it back down into the fermentation, give it a little bit of oxygen. And we do that 3 times a day, every day during the fermentation, which can last for a couple weeks. And at one point here, this past vintage, for instance, we had about 80 of those bins to do at a time. So
Wow.
it'll put some shoulders on you for sure.
Yeah, your sister is definitely like, working that bin there. That's like
she's got some guns. Yeah, it's harvest muscles for sure. Yep. But it's a lot of work, but it really allows us to get intimate with that fermentation. You smell what's going on in every individual bin. If it needs a little more air, if you need to beat it up a little bit more, and you can have that real intimate relationship with each bin. And that's great for the winemaking style that we do here. We want it to be light, firm, and elegant, all kind of at the same time. So,
a couple questions there from Bruce, Ben, in the chat.
You want to read them? Oh, here, let me.
Do you experience too much tannin with the pump over? And lower barrel time with punch down?
Yeah, so we have messed around with doing pump overs on these before, and we find that sometimes it can get a little reductive, and it doesn't really bring all of the aromatic potential of the fruit out. So we're not getting quite as much of the fruit expression. And that's something that some wineries around here do, and it's just a stylistic choice. We do some of our other reds in tanks with a pump over. And the other question was about barrel time. The barrel time, we use mostly neutral oak barrels on these, really just a few newer barrels at a time. And so most of the barrels have seen 3 or 4 vintages of fruit before we're ever going to put any of this red wine in it. And the reason, so you might ask, well, what's the point of putting it in barrels if you're not really getting any of the oak flavor? And, we're not looking for the oak flavor. It's really just about the textural development of that fruit. So during the time in oak, it's going to allow small bits of oxygen to ingress over the course of about a 9 to 10 month oak aging period. It softens the character and really brings the fruit out a little bit more. But we find that too much oak really kind of detracts from that, and it doesn't work with the cool climate fruit forward style that we do here in the Finger Lakes. Whereas, some places like out in California, they're going to look for more oak to complement the heavy tannin extraction and the higher alcohol that they see. So it's really just a stylistic thing. Yep. Yeah, definitely. Mark mentions that that's similar to what they do in Loire. And I mean, we drink a lot of Loire Cab Franc here in the Finger Lakes, and there are some producers there that we really look up to. And it's a style that is actually pretty easy to emulate because we have a climate that's quite similar in many regards. So
great stuff, Ben. We could talk all night. I want to let the nice people get to dinner. I'm assuming that especially on the West Coast, that people are putting their plans together for the evening. But this is amazing. I want to share one other pairing because I just love pairings, and I'm the accidental wine pairing guy. I want to pair the dry Riesling with sushi.
Oh, dynamite! Yeah, I mean, do you have some?
I'm gonna beam it up to you in the Finger Lakes.
Yeah, sushi is great with dry Riesling. Shellfish is great. Oysters on the half shell. Lobster, grilled seafood, especially really good. And one of my favorites with our dry and semi-dry Riesling is actually a recipe that's kind of like an upstate New York thing. Mostly, but this Cornell barbecue chicken, you can Google it, you can find it. It's easy to find, but it's like a vinegar, poultry seasoning, egg white marinade for chicken thighs, or chicken breast, whatever your favorite cut is. And you can marinate it for a couple hours or a couple days, chuck it on the grill. It makes this delicious, tangy chicken. It's, and a little bit of smoke from the grill makes a great pairing with Riesling. That's one of our favorite go-tos in the summertime. So
that with the dry Riesling.
Yes, in the absence of sushi, That's
Yeah.
that's
My other one, this is just, I'm shooting from the hip here. The semi-dry Riesling, the classic with a spicy Indian dish like chicken tikka masala.
yeah. Anything that's kind of got some of that creaminess, savoriness, and spiciness all at once.
Yep.
Man, I love that. I would personally lean towards like a green curry, coconut curry,
Yep.
chicken or something Thai style, because that's more my style. But I do like the tikka masala from time to time. That's more my real cold evenings kind of.
Yeah, it's a little heartier. Yeah.
Yeah. But it can cut through either of those because it's got, sweetness to complement the spiciness. It's got acidity that cuts through the savoriness, and it's got enough flavor to hold up to the strong flavors of curry or masala. Awesome.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
Well, listen, we gotta do this again when I come up, and we'll do it from the tasting room, from the wine room.
Great.
And we'll do a little more food pairing. I want to thank you so much for spending time with us this evening. Super fun for me, and I hope for everybody watching. And for everybody watching, thank you guys for tuning in. It was great hanging out with you. Come back. We're going to be, I have to go to Italy next week. I'm taking a group to Tuscany on a wine tour. But I'll be back May 11th. We're doing a cocktail mixology session with Upstate Vodka, which is a producer, a craft vodka producer from upstate New York, made 100% from New York State apples. Really interesting stuff. May 11th, we'll be back. And Ben, I will see you in the Finger Lakes, and we'll hang out and drink some more wine and do some more pairings.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much for having me. And thanks for everybody for tuning in. Hopefully we'll see you here at the tasting room. And if you stop by, give us a shout. If you have any other questions that are just burning inside you and you really wish you asked them, feel free to shoot them to our Instagram or our Facebook page, and maybe other people will have had the same question. We'll get them answered for you.
Yeah, that's great information. By the way, I'm going to see if I can drag Megan Frank over to Lakewood and come hang out with you in the tasting room. We'll do that.
You let me know the date and I'll give her a call. It'd be great.
Excellent. All right. Thanks, guys. Be good, everybody. Take care now.